go to the USA now, where President Joe Biden has sent strong messages to North Korea, warning there will be reprisals if it launches more missiles. He's also set a new goal for his country to reach 200 million vaccines by his first 100 days in office. Let's get the detail of Biden's first press conference since coming to office. Simon Marks, our Washington correspondent, joins us now. Simon, good evening. Why is it such a big deal that it's taken so long for Joe Biden to have a proper press conference?
Well, I think for a couple of different reasons, Sally. I mean, first of all, you would have to go back more than 100 years to find an American president who has kept the press waiting this long, 65 days, as it was yesterday, to hold the first press conference of his administration. And secondly, because, of course, the Biden team came in saying that they were completely dedicated to public accountability and transparency, in contrast to many of the things that were taking place during the administration of former President Donald Trump, although the former president made himself very accessible, some would argue too accessible to the media during the course of his 4 years in office. But I think the striking thing about yesterday's press conference was, having finally agreed to hold one, he goes into the East Room of the White House. He's facing 30-odd reporters, socially distanced because of COVID-19. He immediately announces that decision to go for 200 million vaccinations in the first 100 days of his presidency. He then starts taking questions, and not a single reporter in the room over the next 70 minutes had a single question for him about COVID-19 or the pandemic. So this was, quite an indictment in a way of the White House press corps. Can you imagine President Ramaphosa giving a press conference and not being asked, under current circumstances, a single question about the pandemic? It was quite extraordinary.
And also, particularly as in Florida, it seems there have been some big beach events, possible super spreader events. Is it perhaps a sign that the rollout is doing quite well? The controversy around what's happening with the COVID plan and the vaccine rollout plan is actually ticking along quite nicely, particularly as in within the next month and a bit, he says they're going to reach 200 million vaccines.
Yeah, I mean, the number of vaccinations are certainly moving at a rapid clip, although I have to say, here in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, it is still maddeningly frustrating in terms of trying to secure a vaccine. I can tell you myself, it is impossible at the moment to secure a vaccination in this particular city. In other parts of the country, other jurisdictions seem to be doing far better. But there are still worrying signs. You mentioned spring break on the beaches of Florida, large numbers of young people travelling across the country to enjoy some warm weather, then possibly taking new COVID-19 variants back to their hometowns, and worrying spikes in the number of infections. This was the week when the country recorded its 30 millionth case of COVID-19 since the pandemic began a year ago. So, public health officials are warning that the United States is not out of the woods yet.
And of course, we've all got Easter coming up in the next week or so. Further to the press conference that Joe Biden had, quite a lot was spoken about in terms of the United States' relationship with the rest of the world. He had quite a lot to say about North Korea, but also around tensions with China and Russia. Tell us more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the issue of North Korea, as you know, in a bid to get Joe Biden's attention, they test-fired a couple of ballistic missiles earlier this week. The president said he's reaching out to partners and allies. There may be reprisals if the North Koreans keep down this path, but he said he was open to diplomacy, providing that the North Koreans agreed that the end goal was the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, which, of course, the North Koreans don't agree to at all. In terms of China and more broadly the world picture, he portrayed the United States as locked into an epic struggle that will determine the success or failure of liberal democracy as a notion. He says that the country is up against this big struggle with China and Russia, autocracies that he insists want essentially to overcome and suppress liberal democracy. So he says that he's going to convene a meeting of democratic leaders later this year in a bid to form what he described as a coalition of democracies to confront Russia and China. Now, of course, what happens if the Russians and the Chinese look at the coalition and say, nice coalition you've got there, and then don't moderate their behaviour? He didn't go into details about that, but that is the plan that he's developing, and it shows you the kind of big picture thinking that's going on inside his White House.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for wrapping that all up so well for us. Simon Marks, our correspondent in Washington.